Welcome to Rhythm of Previews, where we check out the preview chapters of Rhythm of War, the fourth Stormlight Archive novel. I am Danielle with 17th Shard.
And I'm Marvin. Hi.
Hi. As always, we'll have Rhythm of War spoilers and even some greater Cosmere spoilers, just discussion about that. So last week we got some annotations for Chapter 9. What did we hear?
Yeah, so for Chapter 9, Brendan mostly talked about that scene where a scene he always wanted to write, where Kaladin, or a version of Kaladin in a way, returned home. And it actually started out as a scene or as a concept all the way in the beginning for when he was writing Dragonsteel. Actually planned it for the sequel of Dragonsteel, where a character from sort of the original Bridge 4, because Bridge 4 also was from Dragonsteel originally, would return home and sort of face their own story's version of Rashone. And Bren actually dropped another interesting tidbit about Dragonsteel there, because apparently there was like all the kingdoms or all the people in Dragonsteel were basically Bronze Age technology. And there was like one kingdom which was led by a mysterious figure who had way advanced technology, and that's maybe something interesting to look forward to if he keeps that idea for the real Dragonsteel eventually, but maybe he'll just scrap it as well. So yeah. And so yeah, that was interesting to learn about Dragonsteel, I think. It's really cool to sort of get these early Cosmere, more or less, tidbits from Brandon. But the scene where Kaladin returns home actually later then made the jump to Way of Kings Prime. Bridge of 4 didn't make the cut yet. If you've read Way of Kings Prime, you'll know this. There's no Bridge 4. Mm-hmm. But the scene then, of course, as we know, it eventually ended up in Oathbringer, where Kaladin comes back to Hearthstone and sort of sees his family again. But in the sequel to Prime, actually, the return was supposed to only start revealing something about like the Voidbringers in that version of the story, and Marin's, which is Kaladin's name in Way of Kings Prime, abilities as a Windrunner. And like Brand discovered, as he'd bring back the head of the Voidbringer to Dalinar in that story and sort of show that there's a threat. So a bit more of a grim, dark feeling, which Brandon targeted with Way of Kings Prime. But yeah, so instead in Chapter 9, instead of like that really triumphant ending in a way, because that ended on a high note, they defeated that Voidbringer. Chapter 9, which we read last time, served as sort of the ending of that arc in the canon version of the story. And Kaladin probably won't go back to Hearthstone in a long time, if at all. And it is a little more messy, is what Brandon called it, but I think it also just would turn out a lot better than what he would have been able to pull off back then. So
yeah, it has cool some realism. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's really interesting to see how different parts of stories that he's already written have been cannibalized and reworked to fit what's actually been published. It's really interesting to see a writer's process in that respect. I find that very fascinating. And it's really awesome that he's sharing that with us too. Mm-hmm, he didn't have to. He didn't have to talk about things that he wrote like way back when. But
I feel like it's also just awesome to learn that he was able to put in these elements from the earlier stories into these books and still make them work. Like, yeah, that's kind of cool that he can make them work.
He seems to have specific scenes that he really wants to write. And so he reworks them so that he can keep that feeling in that scene, but use it for a different story when that's being published.
Yeah.
So this chapter 10, starts out with the epigraph, which we'll go over. So the epigraph says that tin cages cause the Fabrial to diminish nearby attributes, and steel and iron cages change the Fabrial's polarity. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so tin making diminishers makes a lot of sense with like last week's epigraph, because pewter makes the augmenters. So it doesn't necessarily fit as much with the sort of Elomancy sort of equivalent, because tin enhances the senses in Elomancy at least. So that's a little different, but it makes sense on the sort of the alloy does the negative or like the opposite effect of the main metal. So it makes a lot of sense in that way. I mean, a lot of people predicted that at this point because it
also kind of makes sense because like ferrochemical and hemalurgic metals kind of steal and take senses. So not like the allomancy, it enhances everything, but that's not the end all in how you can use these metals. So that makes sense to me.
And I think it still makes sense because, like, I think, or am I misremembering? Is tin a pushing metal? Or I think it would have to be the pulling metal, right? Yeah, it's a pulling. Eric's nodding. That's always good to know. So yeah, tin is the pulling metal, and pewter is pushing your physical abilities. So that makes sense that they then have opposite effects in Fabrians. Yeah. I think the more interesting part here is honestly the steel and iron part and how they change the polarity of the Fabrial. That's what do you think?
I'm really a little bit confused about the construction of the Fabrial because we had from the previous epigraphs that you drill a hole into the gemstone and thread the metal wires through. So if they're talking about touching it with iron and touching it with steel at a separate time, I don't know how the construction of it works in that respect, unless there's just like specifically a metal cage that touches it and then something else maybe holds the gemstone to activate it or something. I'm a little confused about that.
And like Navani said in the epigraph that advanced metal cages so have or can use iron and steel to pull off that effect. And she specifically says that then they have to touch it, or you have to push one of the metals on the gemstone to make it work. So the touch probably is an important part of how it works. But yeah, it sounds like you can actually also just have the metal around it. So yeah, so I want actual schematics of like favorites, not just like we have our drawings, but more schematics would be nice.
So like in the instance of a pain real, like they mentioned in the epigraph, it uses tin to numb the senses. But if you added something like steel and iron to that, changing the polarity of that, does that mean that you could cause it to enhance a feeling, or because it would like kind of reverse that effect?
We do have that like Navani can flip a switch on the pain reel and then cause pain, like it's sort of a zapping effect.
So in that case, then she's using the other cages.
It's my mental model for it. What I sort of developed in some conversations on the Discord already was like the steel and iron sort of act as they only let through one type of effect, sort of. So iron, for instance, only lets through the diminishing effect, and steel then only lets through the pushing effect, or like the enhancing effect. And so depending on which one, how I feel it might work is you actually need all four metals on the Fabrial, and that's why it has to be a more advanced cage, because you have mechanical stuff in there, and maybe you even have to like account for interference between the metals so they don't cancel each other out or anything like that. So that's how I sort of started to imagine it, because
like when they have a dial on it, like they mentioned that there's a dial on the span reed and stuff that they spin it to make a different effect. So like maybe that dial is like simultaneously opening a cage and closing a cage around it so that it will cause that effect.
Yeah, maybe. Like I think that would make a lot of sense, at least if that I could at least make that work in my head. I can't imagine how because if the iron or steel actually sort of inverts the effect of the actual metal, so you could make tin act like pewter, I'd find it a little weird, because why do you even need pewter then? Had it sort of works for like this for now, until probably Navani proves us wrong.
Because like if the different alloys cause the opposite effects, what is the use for steel and iron if that's all they do? So they must change something beyond just the polar, like maybe when they say polarity, maybe they mean something a little different from what we're interpreting it as.
Like maybe polarity for them just is the active effect, sort of like the expressed effect of the fabrial. So the one that sort of dominates maybe in some way, and if you sort of change the polarity, you just diminish that effect drastically, and then the other one can sort of work its thing. So yeah,
cool. It's there's a lot of information here, but like I'm having trouble processing the actual design of it. So if there's any like cosplayers or anyone who builds prototypes of things, you should totally make a prototype for this so that I can understand it.
And I feel like at the end of part 1, we'll have all these fabrial epigraphs, and then we'll just have to list them all out, go over them, and to see like, okay, now I can make a coherent theory or like mental model of why these things work the way they do.
That would be really fun. I really like these epigraphs. I'd like to, once the book comes out and we can put everything on the copper mine and stuff, just have like a full section for the mechanics of making paper rail and stuff. I love it. All right, let's dive into Kaladin's point of view. The chapter title of chapter 10 is A Single Casualty. Kaladin is feeling better after flying and sunlight, and he speaks with the Spren Yunfa about bonding Lane, and he wants him to give it a good Rosharan week to make it work, because Yunfa is having some
doubts.
Yeah, so he's having some doubts about Relaine. So they fly over Narak on the Shattered Plains, and Dalinar speaks with Kaladin. He asks to speak with Kaladin, and Kaladin kind of cringes. He's expecting him to address what all the other Bridge 4 members were addressing. But Dalinar instead starts by saying he doesn't want Kaladin and the Windrunners to start going easy on the enemy, because he realized that they have let some of them stay alive. And so after they discuss that, they talk about honor and the Parshendi, and they discuss the need for more help from the honor Spren. And then Dalinar brings up eventually what Kaladin was actually dreading, his battle fatigue. So Dalinar relieves Kaladin from duty on the field. So this shakes Kaladin. He realizes that Dalinar is doing this out of care for his men, not just because he's the same as all the other light-eyed blowhards, is his words. And so Kaladin feels at the end of this chapter that he is the single casualty in this battle. So what do we think about Kaladin's viewpoint at the end of this little storyline?
Yeah, so I'm upset a little that he still blames himself for like his failures, is what he thinks, or what he thinks of there, when they're actually like not stuff he can really influence. Like he said, he has fears that he's holding back the other Windrunners from swearing the fourth ideal, and it's really good to see, I think, that Dalinar relieved him of duty here, because it was overdue in a way, because Kaladin just pushed himself all the time, and Dalinar probably felt that he had to do it at some point already. And it's good to see, I think, that he is going to take up other duties from this point on.
And I think Dalinar realizes that Kaladin needs this kind of tough love. Like, he needs to be ordered. He's a soldier. He needs to be told, listen, you need to stop. Even though Kaladin doesn't want to, this is the best way to approach him with his concern, with Dalinar's concerns. So I mean, I can understand Kaladin's viewpoint. He's like, how can I protect people if I'm not out there with them? That makes sense. But at the same time, like Dalinar said in this chapter, he's like, what if you freeze up again? You can't protect them if you're out there, if you're not in the right mindset. And so that's when Kaladin kind of realizes, okay, Dalinar's just doing this because he cares about us, and he's not just, being typical light eyes. So
And I like the little sort of impressions we get of Syl here, where she is really concerned for Kaladin, and also like when Delna said, you can also protect, or you can uphold your oath in different ways, and then Kaladin sort of looks to Syl and she says, yeah, you can manage to protect people and like do your job as a Radiant in a way when you're not on the battlefield. And she's just a great character.
Yeah, she is. She's great for Kaladin. Like their bond is really something that he needs desperately. Speaking of Syl, it's really an interesting little point that Kaladin was able to tell the difference at a distance of who Syl and Yunfa. He could tell that they're slightly different because of their color is unique, almost like a thumbprint or something. But also, like when you have your eyes closed and you hear someone walking, you can kind of tell who they are by their gait. And that's kind of what the impression I had of that was. Like he could tell which one was Syl even at a distance, just because they're so close, I'm assuming. I like that.
They've bonded for 2 years at this point. So that's a long relationship already. And you really get to know together. The other person there. Yeah, definitely. And it's also like Syl has taken up more human mannerisms as well, as what Kaladin notes. Like while the honest, or like Yunfa is more sort of honest friendly, basically, he's more stiff and not as much. Or you can notice that he's a Spren and not a human. While Syl actually sort of does human gestures and sort of expressions. And I feel like that's also just a function of their bond getting deeper. I mean, to some extent, at least, it's probably also Syl's personality. Like she's just is that way, but it's also like she takes up stuff from him, and he also learns stuff from her. So it's a mutual bond.
Yeah, and I'm doing reread, and in Way of Kings, you see her meeting Kaladin, and they kind of develop their relationship, and she's definitely different from how she is in this. Like, yeah, she's like, so maybe that's where Yunfa is at his point, because he bonded a Windrunner, and that Windrunner passed away, and he kind of moved on. He took it as like a casualty of war because maybe their bond wasn't developed enough like Syl and Kaladin's. But like you said, it could just be an aspect of Syl's personality. Maybe she feels things more deeply than others, maybe like more empathetic or something.
Yeah, I found that really interesting that like generally Spren apparently aren't that affected by their Radiant stuff, because so we only really had Syl as an example up until this point, because we know she actually went into a deep slumber, and it apparently isn't that way for all the Spren. I can only assume that it's sort of this more like it's not just the honor Spren thing that they can get over it more quickly. It's more universal, and yeah, it helps them get back into the action quicker, I guess.
Also, there's a difference with how Syl seeked out Kaladin first. He wasn't searching for a bond. So there might be some different way about that, because Yunfa wasn't looking for his Radiant. Like the Windrunners who haven't bonded a Spren, they are looking for a Spren to finally be able to say their oaths and stuff. So it's a little different the way that Kaladin did it than the way that maybe more of a
it's maybe more of a working relationship at the beginning, at least for these Spren, and so it doesn't like it still affects them. It's what Kaladin notes, like they are still like in grief, or they grieve and a little melancholy maybe, but getting a new bond actually helps them get over that. Yeah.
And then also getting a bond, Kaladin mentions that Yunfa's mind will fade, and he kind of holds that over his head. Like, you need to start working on this with R'lain. Like, you need to give him a chance, because otherwise all this work that you've done to adapt to the physical realm, well, he didn't say physical realm, but to our world, will be lost. So it's almost like the Spren have it kind of, they're doing it for themselves, so that they can be in the physical.
I mean, yeah, I think that makes it out, because when they usually get into the physical realm, they can't transition fully into the physical realm because of their because they don't have somebody to sort of draw them into it. So it makes sense that they like to be in the physical realm, because I guess they also get some benefits, because in Shadesmar they more or less are normal people in most ways, but in the physical realm they actually get to fly around and change form a lot. So that might be a lot of fun for them.
Wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe they just they definitely like it in the physical realm. So why would they want to lose it? And it's fun to see Kaladin actually use it as leverage over Yunfa.
Yeah, I'll give you 10 days. You got to work on it. And then speaking of Lane, this poor boy. I mean, he's still fighting against this prejudice, like from even the Spren. Like they're like, he's an enemy and stuff. Like, no, he's not. I feel bad for him.
Yeah, and like I wonder how that actually came to be, like in the beginning of the conflict with the Fused or like the Singers, because the Spren probably were on good terms with them up until that point. So something, not only were the humans taking over to sort of oppose the Singers, and Odium, more or less, the Spren were too. So something in their past must have triggered that. And if it's even then, like R'Lane isn't a Fused or anything, he's just a normal singer, and that he still has such prejudice against him is really sad to see.
It really makes me interested in seeing a Venli chapter eventually, because we'll be able to see Timber and see a different relationship, hopefully. Crossing my fingers.
And actually, because you bring up Timber, it makes me wonder what Aiko, because like the common theory is that he's her daughter, she's his daughter, and what do you think when his daughter went off not only to bond somebody but actually bond a singer as a Radiant? So I hope we get that eventually, just as a sort of tidbit. Yeah, but yeah, R'Lane still hasn't bonded a Spren at all yet, and this sort of seems to point at him really going down the Windrunner route. But I'd still actually like, it's one of my sort of pet theories or pet ideas, is that he'll be the sibling Radiant, because that would just make a lot of sense in my head. Because like the sibling we know they are not male or female, like they aren't binary, and that would make a lot of sense for a singer to bond them, I feel, because like they also have malen and femalen, and just wanted to be the sibling, but this seems to strongly point at him at least getting a try at being a Windrunner, I guess. So
I kind of got the impression that he really wants to be a Windrunner because he wants to be part of the team. And so it would be actually an interesting exploration if he ends up not. After all of this work with Kaladin forcing a Spren to like, it kind of sits wrong with me a little bit that he's like forcing this to happen. It feels like it should be more organic. So
that's the thing with R'Lane all the time, because like you want him to like be a Windrunner and you want him to be part of Bridge 4, but then you also want it to happen organically, and you don't really want to like have somebody else force everybody else to accept him. So yeah, that's going to be interesting at the very least to see Yunfa also deal with his own prejudices and try to accept a singer as a potential bond mate.
Let's see, what else in this chapter? We got a lot. It wasn't a very eventful chapter, but we got a lot of little things here and there about like more relationships between people.
Yeah. Actually, just one more thing about Yunfa and sort of Syl here is that Yunfa apparently isn't able to directly speak to Kaladin. He has to go through Syl here. So I think that's already showing that he's starting to fade from the physical realm and becoming more cognitive again. So he has to use an intermediate to communicate with the people in the physical realm. Yeah.
I actually didn't pick up on that. I was thinking that he was just doing that, like that's just his mannerism that Syl talked to him.
Maybe
it was an etiquette thing. Like maybe his friend doesn't want to talk to someone they're not bonded with or something. I don't know. Although Syl does, but she chooses to reveal herself to, Dalinar and stuff. So, and then Dalinar had some interesting dad moments.
Yeah.
I really like Dalinar. Even after everything and Oathbringer and stuff, like his past, I really like his growth and I actually kind of the way that he treats Kaladin, I feel is so different from the way he treats his own sons. And he kind of treats Kaladin like they're both soldiers. They're both like kind of these grizzled men, and he talks to him like a father, but he kind of gives him that tough love. Like he can understand what Kaladin is going through more than most can, but he still doesn't quite understand what Kaladin is thinking. Like when he tells him something, Kaladin feels just like anger, he feels denial, he feels guilt, he feels sadness, and so I don't know. It's a neat father-son type relationship that they have, and it's so different from Kaladin's own dad.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I just want to see an actual conversation between like Lirin and Dalinar and the different approaches to sort of fathering Kaladin. Yeah. But as far as Dalinar is concerned, I also like how he's genuinely trying to do better and sort of not be the soldier as much, and instead be sort of the mediator and doing bondsmith stuff, I guess.
A leader.
And and what I found interesting there as well is like Dalinar actually mentions that all the scars or whatever that Kaladin has, and then winces after saying that. So he really is trying to not offend Kaladin any further, or like he is trying to not stoke his anger or anything. So he's come a long way, I feel, since his earlier days. Yeah.
And then he's also working with Kaladin to figure out how to interpret his own oaths. Like, you don't have to be there on the field with everybody to protect them. You can teach, he gives them other options that he could do while not actually fighting and putting people at risk.
Yep.
Dalinar was great in this. when he's reading the page and he's like, like make a real show of it in front of the men, and the men are all uncomfortable. They're like,
I really like that. He is that really stern guy a lot of the time, and okay, let's focus here and let's lead these people. But then he can also be like, oh, let's make
them
have a little bit of fun. Yeah, oh, that's cool to see. Yeah.
And then the page that he's reading is, I'm assuming, a report from maybe Adolin or Shallan, because he mentions like, oh, Isla killed herself. Let's publish that.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's because that's how it was reported to him, or if he's saying that as a way to show so that it avoids like people accusing him of sending an assassin or something. Like, it doesn't seem like he would lie, but maybe someone else wrote it for him to read it like that so that he could avoid any speculation or anything.
Yeah, I feel that Shallan probably wrote that report, or at least had it written, and sort of said, okay, she killed herself or committed suicide. And that's a very Shallan thing to do, to sort of try to do it on her own and not reveal it to like
kind of
people
manipulate the events.
And like not reveal it to people who should probably know it, because like it's a huge deal if she didn't kill herself. But yeah, very Shallan thing to do. But yeah, speaking of like Dalinar or like needing to know stuff and being the leader here, is that apparently that all that hiking business is actually like done. It's not really a matter anymore, because Kaladin says he is a king and sort of recognized by that Conference of Monarchs, but he is not high king anymore, like somebody who's above the king of, or like the queen of Thalen and like the Essesh Empire. So I think that's good to see, because we sort of had that entire subplot a little where Alucard swore to him, and then the others were outraged. And it's good to see that after a year they've settled down on an arrangement that will actually work for them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that he can avoid that stigma of being a conqueror and trying to take over and stuff. And then Yasna is the queen, so they're now, I'm going to assume that they are considered equals now, because she's a queen, he's a king, he's not a high king, so they're on the same level and they make decisions with each other's approval. That's what I'm assuming.
Yeah, but what then again is interesting about it is because that Dana actually apparently has the capability, like the authority, to sort of order the occupation of the war camps. I think, like he says that. Mm-hmm. So it's probably that he has gotten, as a king, the authority over Urithiru and sort of the Shattered Plains as a whole, while Yasna sort of governs Alethka, I guess. Mm-hmm. Because, well, it's actually occupied by the singer, so she doesn't have much to govern, but yeah, she doesn't have authority on the Shattered Plains anymore, probably.
Or maybe he's just wanting to make sure that there's order established.
Yeah.
You know, in the absence of, you know, Ayla and all these people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we do have to talk about how Dalinar said, God beyond. Like, what the heck? Where did that even come from?
Capital B, like, beyond. Let's just...
Yeah. So we know that Evie from the, how do you pronounce it? Erie,
yeah.
So their beliefs are about the god, the one, and he's in charge of the beyond. So I don't know if he was saying this as like just like something about the beyond, or if he got this information maybe from Wit, or like where did this even come from?
Yeah, I feel like maybe just sort of let me rephrase it. Like, the way Dalinar works sort of as a person is that he wouldn't just use that as a sort of or not curse, but like an exclamation without actually meaning it. So he probably actually, like, after having sort of denounced or fallen away from Vorinism and the Almighty, he sort of has to turn to another god, and he probably actually believes in the god beyond now to some extent at least. And where he picked it up, maybe the Stormfather just let it slip, because of course the Stormfather would do that. He'd just say, oh yeah, the god beyond is something that people believe in or something like that, and without actually explaining it at all.
Yeah, like you said, I do agree. He does seem to say things intentionally. Like he doesn't just say, like, you know, he won't say Stormfather or something because he knows Stormfather. Like, that's not a god to him anymore. Like, and honor is not a god to him anymore. Really, like they're entities, but why would he swear by just another person? You know, so. Yeah. It's interesting. I wonder if they're going to kind of go into that, or if that's just like a foreshadowing about some kind of plot line or something.
And so I actually did a search in preparation for this. I actually prepared. And the god beyond is referred to once in the whole of the Stormlight Archive, as far as I could find. And it's Wit, but I think it's when he's talking to Shallan.
Yeah, so he mentions it.
Yeah, so he probably hasn't picked it up from anybody up until, like, Oathbringer. He must have heard it sometime in between. So, yeah.
Like, that's why I mentioned, like, maybe it came from Wit, because we don't know what Wit is doing, or Hoid. We don't know what they're doing at this moment. So maybe he is kind of in the background giving Dalinar more information or something.
It could also come from Ash or Talon, because we have had Ash actually swear by Adonalsium in Oathbringer. So she might also be aware of the god beyond, and that is also an option. Or maybe it's somebody completely different, like they have access to, or like free access to Shadesmar now, so maybe they just, I don't know, there's sort of missionaries in the cognitive realm just chilling around and telling people of, oh yeah, you can maybe believe in this god.
Yeah.
Sort of like Sarset would do.
I feel like it wouldn't be the heralds, because from my impression from this chapter, because they talked about like, oh, well, we have two heralds, but one of them is crazy and the other one's dabbling in crazy. So I don't know if Dalinar would really take everything that they say to heart and start like believing in this god that they start talking about.
Yeah, that's true, I guess. Yeah.
Very interesting. Just the tiny two words, and we can theorize about it like crazy.
Maybe Dalinar even like capitalized on his writing skills now and is actually conversing with shards or something, because we know there's a mail service and
writing letters.
Yeah, it would be like it would be such a huge revelation if Branch says, oh yeah, and he received another letter from, I don't know, Harmony.
Oh my goodness.
I don't expect that to happen in this book, but I mean, no. Eventually we probably get this, because
it could.
Why not? So another interesting sort of tidbit, or yeah, it's not even a tidbit, it's like actually a sort of a conclusion, or at least a reaction to one of the revelations we got last book, because we didn't get much of a reaction to it there. Kaladin mentions how apparently the Windrunners and Dalinar as well didn't take the revelation that the singers were the original inhabitants of Rosha lightly, while the other orders took them more in stride and sort of said, yeah, okay, let's just continue working. Apparently we have an enemy to deal with here. And yeah, that's just interesting to see, I think, because arguably you could say that the Windrunners and Bondsmith are the order that's closest to honor in a way, because like one is the honor-spren people and the other is the people who deal a lot with connection and oath and stuff like that. So maybe they just take more seriously because of that.
Yeah, their outlook. So when I learned that, or when it was like finally revealed, I kind of felt it almost a little bit flat, and like I was like, well, yeah, duh, that was obvious. Like just to me, and I know some people kind of really got shook by that, which is really cool, because Brandon here is actually talking about that, like the audience's reaction, but through the Windrunners and Dalinar, they like that shattered their whole perception of everything that ever happened. And other people were like, oh, interesting. And then just kind of moved on. And that I really liked how he tackled that, because that was kind of a complaint that I had. I was kind of like, the big reveal that the humans are the ones who came and invaded and stuff. It was kind of like, yeah, I know. and so yeah, it was cool. And then the people who, I guess, like you said, the people bound more towards honor and like their oaths and things are kind of more tied with that. They found it shocking, and they have a hard time internalizing that revelation that this is what the real history of the world is. And then the other people who didn't, they were kind of like, oh, interesting, but we really have to move on from, our past and deal with things now. So I don't know. I liked that. I thought it was neat.
Yeah, and I think we'll get some interesting thoughts on that from Dalinar and his viewpoints eventually, because I mean, is it really the honorable thing to do to basically fight the original owners of this land again? And so I feel that's going to be one of his sort of internal struggles. And he tries to justify to himself that, well, they're actually now bound to a force which is also external actually to the system. So they sort of threw away that chance, I guess. At least the Fused did. So yeah. Will be cool to see how he internalized it more, because like at this point we see Kaladin actually refers to it, and we see Dalinar reacting not that well to it. So it probably is eating away at him like internally. Yeah. Actually, one final thought from me would just be that because Kaladin sort of acts like, oh, maybe the others other Windrunners are holding back and not swearing their fourth oath because they don't want to do it before me. I'd really love it if it was somebody else who sort of showed Kaladin, okay, you can move on and you can swear your fourth ideal now, and that's sort of how you do it, more or less. And he basically showing him that he doesn't always have to be the leader. That would be really, really cool. And I'd not be surprised if it still was him who did it first, because he's sort of the prototypical Radiant. But if somebody else did it, I'd be also not surprised. Yeah.
And we have to remember, every Windrunner is saying these oaths and they're personal and they mean something to them. And so for them all to be intentionally holding themselves back, I think it would be good writing for them to actually just suppress Kaladin, because that's what the need is, and it's okay for the main character not to be as caught up as a secondary character or something. I think that would be good writing, just to show that every character has their own story. It's not just one character is multidimensional and the other characters are all one-dimensional.
Yeah. I feel like Teft, for instance, would be a good candidate for swearing it before him, and the others as well. It's just he doesn't have to be he can take hints from somebody else at some points at least. So I just think that would be cool to see.
I wonder if we'll get anything about that when we read the Lopen stuff in Dawnshard. Like maybe he will think about that or talk about it and be like, well, I feel ready, but my High Marshal isn't so.
I'm not sure whether Lopen would react in that way. He would just, let's just wear the Force ideal, and then Gunshow, why don't you do it as well, or something like that. So it could go either way for him, yeah. But I feel if Kaladin is going to swear his fourth ideal, it'll be in a situation after, it won't be on the battlefield again. It'll be something he'll do in his new capacity, whatever that will be. Yeah.
Well, that was chapter 10. And you can find all of these preview chapters at 9 a.m. on Tuesdays, Eastern Time. They're on Tor.com. And we'll also let you know on 17thshard.com at 9 o'clock Eastern when they come out. And you can discuss them with us here. You can discuss them with us on our forums, in our Discord, all sorts of different places. We love to talk. And I hope some cosplayers hear my plea. So you can build Fabriel.
And as always, hopefully, finally, eventually chapter next week. We deserve it by this point of view.
Right.
After going through all this stuff with Kaladin and all these lows for him, it'd be good to have a change of pace, or at least
a new point of view.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, bye.
Bye.